Um,
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to a YouthPower Learning webinar about supporting young women through demand-driven and agile programming. We're partnering with EDC, who is sharing some of their findings that connect with the Positive Youth Development Learning Agenda, and partnering with the Gender and Positive Youth Development Community of Practice. Really quickly, for those of you who don't know us, YouthPower Learning is a USAID-funded project aimed at generating and disseminating knowledge about the implementation and impact of positive youth development. And for those of you that don't know what PYD is, it's about recognizing that youth, recognizing their strengths and their assets, their ability to be able to use and leverage those assets, and contributing to positive change for themselves and their communities, and that they are supported by an enabling environment. And one of the great elements of our project is the ability to partner together. And so we have opportunities to be able to learn and share what you are doing, what the broader youth development community is doing. This is a space for being able to connect and make your own contributions. I'm going to mention the Positive Youth Development Learning Agenda just a bit more in a moment, but you have a real opportunity to be able to contribute to advancing the knowledge around positive youth development. If you're under the age of 35, we have a platform for connecting and networking young people, and so that's an opportunity to connect. Or if you have a lot of content that are relevant for young people, or support youth networks, even being a sponsor for Youth Lead. And then, of course, adjoining our communities of practice as a space for being able to talk, to connect, to learn from each other. So thinking about, just coming back to the Positive Youth Development Learning Agenda and framing our discussion today, we've worked with the broader community, and I'm sure some of you that are on the call, as I can see some of your names here on the side, and thinking about what are the gaps in knowledge around positive youth development, and what are the most important things we need to know next about the field. And so we have 5 themes under which there are specific questions. And I think the 2 themes most relevant for our discussion today is thinking about positive youth development for vulnerable and marginalized populations, and really thinking through how do we best reach these populations. And I think the discussion today brings forth some really tangible ideas for us as a community to be thinking about. The other one is really around youth engagement in PYD programs, and what are strategies for engaging young people and being able to learn and partner with young people. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to our presenters. I think Nancy might be starting us off, but I'll pass it over to you guys, and I'm really excited to listen and learn from you.
Hi, good morning. This is Hannah Coons from EDC. I'll be filling in for Nancy today. Unfortunately, she's not able to join us. Just wanted to check. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you. So yeah, thank you again to YouthPower for giving us this platform to share a little bit about our work, and as was mentioned earlier, again, how it connects to the Positive Youth Development Framework as well as the Learning Agenda. So just to kind of get us started, on the panel today we'll have my colleague Nancy Chervin, a Youth and Workforce Advisor at EDC. We'll also be joined by Amy Deal, who's an Associate Project Director, and Tanya Selnick, an Associate Project Director as well. So just as we get started, obviously you've seen the theme as supporting young women through demand-driven and agile programming. At EDC, our theory of change around engaging women and girls is, first of all, realizing the challenges that they face, obviously in different contexts, that it can be slightly different. And then looking to see how we as EDC can work with local partners, working with communities, working with the participants themselves, with the young women, to ensure that they obtain the knowledge, the skills, and the agency they need to adapt in a rapidly changing world. We believe that once young women and girls have access to high-quality education, work readiness training, work experiences, and coaching and mentoring opportunities, they can transform themselves, their families, and their communities. So EDC's programs support young women between the ages of 10 and 29. So today we'll be highlighting 3 of our programs and the approaches that we take in those projects. So there's different age groups within each project, but sort of broadly, that's the age range that we'll be talking about. So looking at how EDC is working to develop their personal agency, helping them to build healthy relationships, and how they can learn work readiness and leadership skills that enable them to thrive in their communities based on local market demand and also demand-driven based on what youth themselves and what young women are telling us in the communities where we work. So today we're going to highlight 3 successful approaches that EDC has used in its programming to address 3 key themes, again aligned to positive youth development, and 2 of these are directly aligned to the learning agenda for the PYD framework. So those themes, I think we can move to the next slide. I'm not sure if we're already there. Okay, perfect. So the first theme that we'll be looking at today is demand-driven interventions to empower young women. So Tanya will be looking at that and not just demand-driven, but looking specifically at 2 types of demand, looking at program demand as well as market demand, and how EDC programs to enable young women to have access, to markets and to the best opportunities based on the context that we'll look into. The second theme that we'll be looking at today is going to be presented by Amy Deal. That theme is approaches to breaking down barriers for vulnerable and marginalized populations. We'll be looking at our work in South Africa and Macedonia. And then the final theme that we'll be looking at will be presented by Nancy Chervin, and that theme is effective strategies to facilitate meaningful youth engagement in the workforce and community. So we'll be looking at our work in the Lower Mekong. And just sort of to recap those themes, we'll be highlighting again as we go, looking at them specifically, and then at the end kind of summarizing some of the key takeaways and the lessons learned from our programming, and then opening up, wanting to hear from you as well as implementers. I'm not sure if we have any donors as well on the call, but again, sort of focused on hearing from other implementers and their experiences as well. So with that said, I think I can pass the mic over to Tanya.
Hi, and thank you very much, Hannah. So I'm going to present some ways that we're framing program demand in our Guguga Dikori Kazi Kanozu project, which is based in Rwanda. And the project aims to reach 40,000 vulnerable and out-of-school youth and equip them with the soft and technical skills needed for them to gain employment in new enterprises. The focus of the project
Sorry, Tanya, to interrupt. Could all the presenters please mute themselves when they're not speaking?
Market-driven training, private sector. And I just want to make sure everyone can hear me okay? Okay.
Hannah, I think you need to mute yourself.
So hold on one moment. I'm going to actually switch.
Sorry, is this better? Okay, excellent. So I'm going to ditch my mic and just talk really, really close to my computer. So the Rwanda project, Guguga Dikori Kazi Kanozu, is aiming to reach 40,000 vulnerable and out-of-school youth in Rwanda and equip them with soft.
Hi, Tanya. Your sound is very faint. Could you please speak closer to the microphone?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of talking into my computer at the moment. Unfortunately, the echo, I think, was being caused by my mic.
Are you able to hear me at all?
Not very much at all. So please, could you bring the microphone over by your lips?
Let me try.
Tanya, we can't hear you at the moment. Hannah, I'm wondering if you might be able to kind of start us off as Tanya's getting back in.
Why don't we skip to theme 2, and I will go over that, and then we'll loop back to theme 1 once Tanya is available.
That would be perfect.
Okay. Slides are catching up.
Okay, I'm online. I'm back on right now. Can you hear me?
Yes, much better. All right,
okay.
There you go, Tanya.
Okay. So I'm so sorry about that. So just very briefly, I was giving a description of the project that I'm going to be focusing on. So Rwanda Huguka Dukore Kazi Kanozi, or HDAK, aims to reach 40,000 Rwandan vulnerable and out-of-school youth and equip them with the soft and technical skills needed for them to gain employment or launch a business. And capacity building, particularly of local partners, is a significant part of our project, and our program is funded by USAID. So what I wanted to focus on, we work at a number of levels, including youth, with businesses, and with government. And we have feedback loops established to make sure that we are hearing directly from each one of those stakeholder groups. However, I'm going to focus on how we work with our implementing partners, which are such a significant component of our project. And I'm going to provide 2 examples of how we are demand-driven in our programming. For the first of these, I'm really borrowing terminology from markets, and I'm applying it to the ecosystem that our project lives in. So we have 22 local partners in our network, and all of them are working together with us to meet the needs of our youth beneficiaries. We talk about program demand in terms of being aware of what our beneficiaries are telling us, and this is particularly the case for our implementing partners, since they are so well positioned to understand how our programs are impacting youth. And engaging them in this way really builds their capacity as full members of the team and bringing new ideas to the table. Under HDAK, local partners have approached EDC with several challenges, and the one I'm going to focus on here is that up to 14% of women enrolled in our program are nursing mothers, and this is causing really high rates of dropout. We challenged our partners to think about how to best support these young women to reduce dropout rates, and they came back to us with a couple of different types of solutions. So one of these was provision of porridge to babies while mothers were in class. Another was childcare, providing childcare or support from local caregivers, again to encourage mothers to be able to stay in class. And the third was intentional selection of young mothers to create homogeneous groups so they could form solidarity groups that would help provide social support as young mothers navigated the transition into employment or self-employment. So where feasible and in alignment with our overall scope of work, we cover the costs for these initiatives that are brought to us by our program partners. And the pictures here are just a couple of our beneficiaries under HDAK. And so these are the people that we're trying to listen to and work together with our partners to make sure that we're reaching. So for the second part, I'm going to be talking much more traditionally about market demand. We work with our implementing partners to conduct local labor market assessments to map economic opportunities. And we map these opportunities on a local level because that's where they are for the youth. That's where the jobs are. That's where the opportunities for self-employment are. And doing this helps us to explore what opportunities are also underserved in terms of existing skills demand that could provide pathways for youth, and particularly for young women, to launch their own businesses or enter the workforce. They allow us, these local labor market assessments, allow us to be responsive to economic opportunity. They help us to encourage young women to engage in high-demand fields, and they allow us to see where the opportunities are for market-relevant training. And through our internship component, work-based learning, young women can then discover and experience different types of work. Sometimes these assessments open the door for women to join male-dominated trades, and sometimes they actually help us develop targeted interventions that support women and girls in high-demand technical areas that may align with what we think of as more traditional careers. So in that latter category, because of market demand, we actually developed our junior caregiver program. It's an early childhood development program, and it's designed to be play-centered, and it's an approach to teaching pre-primary students that focuses on children's cognitive development, so their literacy, their numeracy, and also prepares them through for school. We worked with 158 young women to become caregivers. They were engaged in a 3-month program, including internships at ECD centers, and then they gained coaching and mentoring by the project. After that internship, the project matched these caregivers with centers for permanent employment. Of the young women who completed the program, all were absorbed into jobs that were either wage-employed or self-employed as caregivers, and significant positive impact on the children they taught was actually found in pre-post testing. So we found that youth were much more school-ready after attending these centers. This program has actually been validated by the Rwanda's Workforce Development Authority, the WDA. So it's aligned with the formal TVET curriculum, and it's poised to be rolled out nationwide. So the next slide, I just wanted to leave you with a quote from an inspiring young woman who did decide to go into non-traditional employment and decided that she was really passionate about welding. So I'll give you a moment to just read the quote. Okay, and now I'm going to hand this off to Amy, who's going to talk about Theme 2, which is approaches to break down barriers for marginalized populations.
Great. Thank you, Tanya. Hope everyone can hear me okay. So the main focus of this webinar is on gender, especially gender as it's related to adolescent girls and young women. But we also wanted to highlight some examples of social inclusion more broadly. So in this section, we'll also highlight work related to gender norms, sexual and gender diversity, personal and collective action around this issue, as well as our work with youth with disabilities. I should also note that the illustrations you see on some of these slides are from the curriculum from the activity in South Africa, which I'll talk about a little bit more on the next slide. Okay, so one of the approaches that EDC is taking to break down barriers for vulnerable and marginalized populations is by teaching about healthy relationships by promoting more equitable gender and social norms, including respect for youth with different gender identities and sexual orientations, through the South Africa school-based sexuality and HIV prevention education activity. So this USAID-funded activity partners with the South African Department of Basic Education to create comprehensive sexuality education scripted lessons for grades 4 through 12 to help learners understand and explore these topics through scenario-based learning. As part of the development process, the scripted lesson plans were extensively piloted, which allowed the program to incorporate important teacher and youth voices and update materials based on that input. So the scripted lessons help learners understand how gender norms are learned and to explore the impact of stereotypes and linkages between gender norms, romantic and intimate relationships, and violence. The scripted lessons were designed to build on each other from younger to older. Students with the full 9 years of lessons will see a progression of these themes throughout, beginning with topics like respecting my body and others' bodies, and messages about gender, and moving through to discussions on gender equality and healthy relationships, and gender, power, and violence, and concluding with how to take personal and collective action against gender-based violence. Lessons also aim to be supportive of sexual and gender diversity and to promote empathy. So EDC has filtered lessons to ensure that people who are not heteronormative would feel included and that the content was relatable for them. Examples and images are structured wherever possible to be relevant regardless of sexual orientation. As issues arise on this topic that can be challenging for teachers from a wide spectrum of backgrounds and ideologies, we made special point to include teachers' notes on how to make a diverse range of students feel comfortable participating and also have their privacy respected. So as I've indicated earlier, lessons focus on personal action as well as collective action that youth can do to respond to harmful gender norms and the widespread gender-based violence that they may encounter in their lives and communities. It's emphasized with students that personal reflection and collective action, be it big or small, are important to transforming gender norms in our lives and communities. All right. So an important component for the lesson's effectiveness is to support the system around it. So with teachers, culturally, sexuality is a subject that's not openly discussed across generational lines. So this is shifting in South Africa and many other places. It still remains true in the households of many young people. And this leaves myths, stereotypes about sex and sexuality and gender norms to persist. So teachers are trained in small group settings, and then trainings are intended to mimic classroom settings. The group settings also present an opportunity for educators to become more at ease with low comfort topics. We've also learned that it's crucial for teachers to examine their own bias, myths they believe, or gender or cultural norms they hold, and to discuss those in training in order to effectively teach this content. The teachers often face the same personal challenges and have had similar experiences to their students and often need their own support to address these needs. So some of the supporting activities work to provide teachers with support on these issues. And, you know, time and time again in this project, we've been told by teachers that they appreciate and need the scripting on these challenging topics. The scripted lessons are preferred by them, you know, who often lack expertise and are not comfortable presenting difficult topics. Additional activities beyond the curriculum and the teacher training are also important for successful implementation. So education officials are critically important to supporting teachers teaching this content. Teachers need mentoring and coaching on these topics. School governing boards and broader parent orientation we found is also important so that parent groups understand what is being taught and thus have less opposition to it, and so that they can advocate for this type of education and other youth-friendly services within their community. So the program also participates in USA Dreams partnerships, which provides opportunities for select adolescent girls and young women in the program to participate in some out-of-school activities that reinforce concepts taught in the classroom. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about EDC's work with youth with disabilities. So I'll highlight here activities from the HDAK project in Rwanda that Tanya also spoke a little bit about, but I'll also include some work about a previous work-based learning program in Macedonia, Macedonia Youth Employment Skills, or the YES network, which connected public and private sectors in Macedonia to improve youth employability, and worked with out-of-school youth in Tibet high schools and with youth with disabilities. So EDC's HDAK project in Rwanda and the Macedonia project I just described provide examples of people with disability involvement in program design, management, and technical leadership. In HDAK, the project specifically partnered with specialized organizations to involve people with disability in design, management, and leadership of adapting training materials and tools. So you can see, for example, the pictures on this slide show Work Ready Now materials translated into Braille for students with visual impairment. In Macedonia, the project hired a youth with disability coordinator, herself a youth with disabilities who was legally blind, and she did the adaptations and worked hand in hand with the leadership at disabled people's organizations. This project model included one disabled people's organization and one National Employment Service Agency trainer for out-of-school youth. So youth saw disabled adults in leadership roles, which we felt was a driver of significant change in mindset. In Macedonia, the mantra, "Nothing about us without us," is something the Youth with Disability Coordinator said a lot. And this idea was at the heart of the work in Macedonia. Youth with disabilities and people with disabilities were at the helm from design through implementation, and the voices were critical to the success of the program. Those projects also built the capacity of private sector to hire youth with disabilities. In Rwanda, the HDAK project engaged employers through work-based learning linkages that supported the private sector to discover youth with disabilities abilities. For work-based learning projects, the Macedonia project adapted a workshop to teach industry partners how to be good workplace mentors to address the needs of youth with disabilities specifically. And the project piloted demand-driven training for youth with disabilities, for example, teaching coding to visually impaired youth once they had screen readers available. Building partner capacity for social inclusion was also a part of each program. HDAK built implementing partners' capacity on social inclusion through encouraging females to engage in male-dominated trades and provision of sign language instruction during training of deaf youth on work-based learning programs. For out-of-school youth in Macedonia, disabled people's organization trainers paired with trainers in the National Employment Service Agency, as I mentioned, and this strengthened the skills of the Employment Service Agency's trainers and helped them to reach more marginalized, mainly housebound youth with disabilities. So I'd like to conclude this theme just with this quote as well, which is a quote by a trainer in the HDAK program in Rwanda, which provides an example of the importance and impact of the work to provide more opportunities and empower youth with disabilities. Okay, and now I'll hand it over to my colleague Nancy Chervin to discuss theme 3.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me? No? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about that. We're in 4 different locations right now. So I am going to speak to theme 3, effective strategies to facilitate meaningful youth engagement in the workforce. I'm mainly going to be speaking about a project in Southeast Asia. EDC, more broadly, has developed youth leadership training tools and resources that help youth, and particularly young women, take leadership positions on teams for innovation challenges, manage design thinking workshops for their peers, and become peer livelihood coaches. These approaches have been implemented in Africa and across Asia. And as mentioned, I'm going to share examples from Southeast Asia, in particular the USAID LMI COMET project. So the Lower Mekong Initiative Comet Project is a regional project based in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam. And they aim to close the skills gap in science, technology, engineering, math, and accounting and tourism, as we lovingly called STEM plus AT, by transforming educational approaches through teacher professional development, work-based learning, and innovation. COMET works to train youth with market-driven skills, promote gender-balanced employment in key sectors, and provides, as I mentioned, training tools and resources to support young women in STEM. So in a moment, I'm going to highlight a few specific interventions for young women, but more generally, our focus was inclusion. We weren't trying to recruit young women into STEM programs, which would have been really difficult in a regional, very large, broad program. However, once they were there, our focus was how to be inclusive with the activities and provide extra support and prepare them to face hurdles in their careers, which they will inevitably face in largely male-dominated sectors. So we did not necessarily steer people to choose particular fields by gender. But we did find that was naturally done locally by our partners. We're working with vocational colleges and universities, all post-secondary. So I want to highlight a few examples that I found really interesting when I was based there. So in Myanmar, unlike most of the world, IT programs were majority female. Why is this? It's because the parents see this as a stable position and a safe job with normal hours in a business environment. On the flip side, in Thailand, we worked with a TVET college on a program for petroleum industry technicians. It was 100% male. Why? Because the work environment, could you go back to the slide? Someone switched the slide. The work environment would not be appropriate for young women because of the hours, the location of the work at a refinery or an oil rig. So another interesting observation is we worked a lot with project-based learning, which is a very interactive approach. It's an inquiry-based. I conducted a lot of classroom observations, and what I noticed is even though the ratio in the classrooms in the region were very often 20-plus young men and 1, 2, maybe 3 young women, they were equally engaged and vocal, which was really, really encouraging. Okay, so now you can go ahead to the next slide. So I'm in the rest of my section here, I'm going to go over these 3 different strategies, these 3 different events and methods that we took to empower young women in various ways. So the first was we organized a 2-day workshop with private sector partners for women in tech, where female students came together to set career goals, receive mentorship from female professionals in science and technology, and to work to build a professional network. The next one I will talk about is ensuring that innovation challenge teams were of mixed genders, and this allowed young women to often become role models in their communities. The third intervention I'll talk about is the Mekong My Way campaign that focused on female inclusion in tech careers and was connected to the Women of Impact event led by Cisco. And finally, I want to highlight the Youth Skills to Work Toolkit, which youth can use to promote gender inclusivity in their own university and TVETs, however they like during career development sessions. So moving to the next slide, celebrating women in tech. Okay, cool. All right, so this activity happened in January of 2016. The U.S. Presidential Science Envoy for the Lower Mekong River countries named Dr. Geraldine Richmond worked with the project to organize a workshop called Women in Tech, a celebration of women in technology in the lower Mekong countries. We aim to empower and support young women in the STEM workforce with private sector support from Intel, We Do, which is an organization that provides professional mentoring for young women, particularly in the STEM fields, Cisco, and Microsoft. The project brought together 27 female students in the STEM field from 10 universities to participate, and it took place in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. Young women from the region came together to set career goals, receive mentorship from female professionals in science and technology, and to build a network that would last far beyond the life of the project. The private sector representatives were female professionals from Cisco, Intel, and Microsoft, and they talked about their experiences in the STEM field and challenges, and provided one-on-one mentorship for the participants. From the U.S. government side, the event included a representative from the consulate in Ho Chi Minh City and the science envoy, who is promoting women's involvement in science and tech globally. So the key takeaway from this event was networking was invaluable not only for participants, but also for the project, for the organizers to know how we could best leverage partnerships in future years for the project. Okay. So innovation challenges. I'm really excited to share about innovation challenges. We've had a lot of fun doing this in the project. This started with the YSEALI Food of Work Innovation Challenge. In this particular challenge, youth from 10 countries in Southeast Asia came up with innovative solutions to problems in agriculture and aquaculture in their communities. We worked with, again, our partners Cisco and Intel and the local host country government. In terms of gender, we had several prerequisites. Every team needed to be multidisciplinary, but also mixed gender with 1 to 2 female per group. This small prerequisite snowballed into a much bigger impact. Our female participants, who we consider beneficiaries, became some of our best partners and advocates for gender empowerment, innovation, at their universities and TVETs and in their communities. We had participants tell us that they went on to talk to their younger classmates and gave talks to their universities to promote gender empowerment and talk about their experiences with mentorship, of gaining a network and working with both men and women around their country and beyond, because this was, again, regional, and that their skills as young females in STEM were equal to as any other person. So this challenge was not a one-off. We continued the challenge approach at an institutional level with all 10 universities and TVETs in our network. In Cambodia, our female students won another global competition. This kind of publicity really helps inspire other young women in our communities to help innovate and participate in tech fields. So the key takeaway from our Innovation Challenge experience was that our female participants became our best partners and role models for others in their communities that didn't directly participate in our events. If you want to develop gender empowerment projects, partnerships with private sector partners are important. Partnerships with governments are, of course, important. But even more importantly, partnerships with the beneficiaries themselves, viewing them as partners rather than us giving them something, because they themselves really contribute to the program. So I'm going to go on to the next event here. This is actually 2 connected campaigns. The first one was called Mekong My Way, an open competition to showcase female students and young professionals in the STEM field. At the beginning, the project team on the ground knew they wanted to create an online campaign on gender, but they didn't quite know which aspects of gender they wanted to address. So they conducted a focus group with about 15 Thai students, and from that they got very meaningful insights about from one of the students. He asked that, he suggested that we shouldn't be focusing on increasing the numbers of young women in STEM fields, but rather focusing on how we can make STEM fields welcoming to everyone regardless of their gender, and how we can make STEM more inclusive. So that's how this campaign was created, because we know there wasn't necessarily one best approach. I believe Rachel shared with you all a link to a video of this presentation where you can hear actually some of our young female colleagues presenting. In there you can see clips of this campaign, and also if you follow the hashtag or the link you can find the video itself. With this campaign we partnered again with Cisco and WeDo. They both have existing networks of female students and young professionals, and we connected their networks with the project's Mekong Skills to Work network. So what this led to, sorry, I'm clicking slides at the same time, we reached over 1.6 million people within 1 month of the Mekong My Way campaign. Winners received exclusive career counseling from Cisco and mentoring through WeDo. So while connecting online is wonderful, it's obviously not as strong as connecting face-to-face. So that's why we decided to join Cisco's global initiative called Women of Impact. Cisco invited WeDo in the project to collaborate on this face-to-face event to celebrate young women's empowerment. And we could see clear synergies between the project campaign, the online campaign, and the face-to-face event. And so that's why we decided to tie them together. So lastly, I want to speak about this Youth Skills to Work toolkit. The development was a youth-led initiative. So this was launched just in March. I also believe the organizers of the webinar provided the download for you for this. The Youth Skills to Work Toolkit is a guide that helps youth leaders plan and implement activities that will boost their career skills, such as resume building, interview preparation, or having a professional presence online. In the toolkit, there's a step-to-step guide on how to implement career readiness activities for your peers. Youth promote gender inclusivity in their own universities in whichever way they would like. There's multiple sections in the toolkit which feature a gender lens, where the organizing youth leaders are encouraged to add a gender inclusivity angle to their career readiness activity. This will become a legacy document that raises youth awareness on both work readiness skills and gender sensitivity. Beyond our private sector partners, government, and the project itself, if youth can empower themselves and talk about these issues on their own with a gender perspective, this can be the most sustainable, institutionalized way to keep the gender conversation going with those we really want to impact, the youth beneficiaries. So now I'm going to hand it over to Hannah for a few concluding remarks before we shift to our Q&A.
Thank you, Nancy. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, I'm just going to go ahead in good faith that everyone can hear me. Thank you so much to all three of my colleagues, Tanya, Nancy, and Amy, for the presentations. Just to kind of put a bow on sort of the presentation and wrap things up, just wanted to kind of highlight a couple of sort of things that have come through, both for us as presenters and also as we have been supporting these projects, through the programming angle. So just a couple of the things that I wanted to highlight, looking at how we as implementers can build better programs. Obviously looking ahead, requires us to, analyze, looking at lessons learned, looking at how we adapt, not just at the end of a project, but really looking at how we can be agile while we're programming. How can we adapt as we're implementing these interventions? So obviously, youth and specifically in this case, young women can be better served. So the first kind of takeaway that I want to highlight is, looking at how we can be adaptive in our learning and management. And through this, not only obviously having better programmatic outcomes in general for a project, but also looking at how that can also lend to shifting gender norms and biases. Amy obviously highlighted how we're doing that in South Africa through the scripted lessons, and obviously, shifting gender roles, traditional gender roles and social norms takes a long time. It's not something that can be done overnight. It's often something that takes more than just sort of the 5-year typical programmatic cycle that many of us work with. But again, looking at how, as we're implementing, how we can take the time to be looking at the indicators that we're tracking, the studies that we're conducting, the assessments that we're doing, and then how we can take that information in real time and make sure that we're adapting the intervention as best as we can as we go. And then, again, looking specifically how gender norms and social norms are being shifted. The second key takeaway I wanted to highlight is, how demand-driven programming results in new opportunities and greater success in the labor market. So Tanya obviously looked at how we're doing that in Rwanda, specifically program demand-driven as well as market demand-driven. So oftentimes I think many of our programs, when we're looking at gender and we do the gender analysis, we're eager to address the gender gaps and barriers that young women are facing in their communities, which is a really important key step to this process. Having that initial analysis or the assessment, then to be able to obviously design and implement your intervention. And I think part of that is looking at how some of these tools in workforce development programs, for example, can through a labor market assessment or through sort of the ongoing consultations that you have with your partners, with your communities, and obviously with young women themselves, how we can make each of the interventions, the activities, meet the demands in local communities. So we saw, again, we looked at that, how that was happening in Rwanda. And then the last key takeaway that I want to quickly highlight is how we can incorporate activities that provide agency to young women and how we can help drive transformation, help them to drive their own transformation. So I think hopefully that came through in several of the presentations. I think specifically the last presentation that Nancy shared was a great example of how we're connecting young women to work-based learning opportunities, through internships, through different competitions to basically build their skill sets and help them to be able to put those skill sets and the things that they're learning into practice, into real-world settings, so that when they're ready, they're already equipped with the skills that they need. So just want to kind of shift from that to the question and answers. I know we don't have a lot of time left, and unfortunately I don't think we'll have time for everyone's questions. So just to kind of make the most of the time, I think I'm just going to focus kind of on each presenter and go through that way and just ask a couple of questions to each one. And again, apologies if we don't have time to answer your question during the presentation, but at the end there'll be the contact information for each presenter, so I think they'd be happy to hear from you if you want to reach out to them directly. So Tanya, I'm going to start with you if that's okay. Just wanted to ask 2 questions. First question is, did the project provide childcare for the Young Mothers activity? And then second, is this program taking place in an urban center?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Sorry, I saw the on. So the project does provide childcare for young mothers while they're in training. We do this as different implementing partners come to us and propose that as something that we might want to consider covering. We try to be very careful to listen to our implementing partners, and so instead of rolling out a solution wholesale, we do work with them to see what they think and what might work best. But we do provide childcare as one of the interventions that we cover. And in terms of urban-rural, we work in 25 of 29 districts in Rwanda, so we are almost nationwide, covering a range of urban and rural areas. And we actually see some of our highest demand for interventions around childcare in rural areas as opposed to urban ones. And Hannah, I think you might be on.
Okay, I think I'm on. So just going to Amy now, and there were a couple of questions about South Africa. The first one was, could people have access to the curriculum and the scripted lessons, especially for those who are working in the same region? And then the second question was, for teachers that are being targeted through the program, what is the specific category of teachers, or is it all teachers?
Yeah, great question. We're working on a few final details with some curriculum updates, and then they will be available on DEC shortly, the USA DEC website. And you could also email me directly. I'll put my email in the chat box in the next few weeks if you're interested in accessing some of those materials. And so in this project, we're working with life skills teachers in grades 4 to 6, and then life orientation teachers in grades 7 through 12. So these are teachers who are specifically charged with teaching a life skills related program. So those are the target teachers that we're working with, and of course, you know, other heads of department for life skills and life orientation and principals and community members, parents, and things like that are also engaged.
And then the last question we're going to look at is how the underprivileged garment worker would face these automation and innovation challenges with their little academic educational background. So I'm just going to open that question up to all of our presenters. I think maybe several of you would like to comment on that.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Question. I saw someone from Brookings is on the chat because I was at an event recently where we're also talking about innovation and what that means for education and preparing young people. And I think adding the lens of out-of-school youth and youth who dropped out or with limited education is really important to be considering. I'm going to give a very general response to this, is that whatever we can do to inculcate critical thinking skills, adaptability, these are very universal work readiness or cognitive skills are so important for young people to be able to navigate a quickly changing world. So that's why using project-based learning, inquiry-based approaches, getting away from lecture, getting into youth really exploring the world around them and thinking of solutions and working with people who think differently from them, the multidisciplinary approach, really, however we can do that in the environment we're working is really important. I'm going to turn it to Tanya, actually, because she's been working with different populations with innovation challenges than I have.
Thank you. So I think the question comes at a really critical time where we know that entire supply chains are going to be remade by automation. One thing that we've been learning is that as that is happening, there are increasingly new opportunities, but those that are most at risk are those who have low education or low skill levels. Echoing what Nancy was saying, I think it's really about training youth to think creatively, to be adaptive in their thinking, to be entrepreneurial in their spirit and their mindset. And a lot of those skills come from hands-on learning, from trying to work through a project, and from taking leadership roles amongst their peers to test out new ideas. We do with youth with a wide range of educational backgrounds. But I think most critical is that innovation and creativity is really about just getting in there and not being afraid to fail. So Hannah, I think I will help.
Great, thank you so much, Tanya. And I think that concludes the round of question and answers. Again, we're so sorry there wasn't time to answer everyone's questions during the webinar, but please feel free at the end to write down the contact information for the presenter that you wanted to reach out to and ask your follow-up questions. So with that, just wanted to thank YouthPower again for this opportunity to share a little bit about our work, and now pass the mic back to them.
Great, thank you, Hannah. That was a really fantastic presentation, and really appreciated your thoughtfulness in guiding us in how we can better reach different populations of young people, ensuring that gender integration is included, and sort of how to go about some very concrete strategies for that. I'm also here with Jacinta Kapungu from the Gender and PYD Community of Practice, and didn't know if you had any follow-up remarks you wanted to make at all.
Just wanted to say that any of the questions that are posed, we will get answers for as well, so that people can have those addressed. And we definitely want to thank the presenters, and we'll also send any resources that are available on the topic of interest.
And so just thinking about next steps for those of you who heard early on us mentioning the learning agenda, and I think this was a great example in thinking about adding to the evidence and adding to our knowledge around strategies for advancing positive youth development. And so I encourage you to write to us if you also believe you have ways that you can contribute, and for us to be able to amplify on your behalf. We have opportunities for doing future webinars. We would like to be able to include your learning in some upcoming briefs that we'll be writing against each of these learning agenda themes. And so if you have materials or information you want to share, please send that to us at info@youthpower.org. If you're not on our communities of practice and you've come to us today through a different channel and you want to join, you're able to do so on youthpower.org on our communities page. And there's just a lot of information out there. So thank you to our presenters, and we look forward to seeing you in some of our future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you.